8-year-old Emma pointed at the golden certificate hanging in the CEO's office, while her father, in his janitor's uniform, mopped the floor in silence. "That's Daddy's signature," she exclaimed with innocent pride. Catherine Sterling, CEO of TechVision Seattle, laughed dismissively. "Sweetheart, your father cleans bathrooms. That signature belongs to the genius who founded this company 20 years ago." But when the little girl pulled out a faded photograph and a document no one had ever seen, the CEO's face went pale. The janitor who had emptied her trash for 5 years harbored a secret that would rock the entire company and reveal the greatest injustice in Silicon Valley history. Seattle's South Lake Union District gleamed with glass towers, reflecting the ambitions of thousands of tech workers. TechVision Seattle occupied the top 3 floors of the Amazon Sphere's neighboring tower, a $200 million artificial intelligence empire dominating the American market for predictive analytics. It was 6 in the morning when Michael Bennett crossed the empty lobby with his cleaning cart. 45 years lived in shadow. 5 of them spent cleaning offices where others built the future. The blue uniform with Mike, stitched on the chest, had become his second skin, an armor of invisibility protecting him from uncomfortable questions. But this Tuesday in November was different. It was Bring Your Kids to Work Day, a company initiative to show children what their parents did. Michael had hesitated long before bringing Emma. His 8-year-old daughter believed he was important in this company, and in a way, she was right, though not how she imagined. Emma was everything to Michael. After his wife Anna died of leukemia 3 years earlier, the little girl had become his only reason to live. Intelligent beyond her years, curious as only children can be, with those same green eyes as her mother that seemed to see beyond appearances. The day began as always. Michael methodically cleaned every surface, emptied trash bins, polished desks. But with Emma by his side, everything took on a different dimension. The girl followed him proudly, helping with small tasks, chattering cheerfully about her progress at school. Everything changed when they entered the CEO's office. Catherine Sterling, 42 years of pure ambition, had reached the company's summit 5 years earlier through methods many called ruthless. Beautiful in that cold way of those who use power as makeup, she ran TechVision with an iron fist, taking credit for every success and deflecting every failure onto subordinates. The office was a shrine to minimalist luxury. Italian designer furniture, panoramic views of Seattle, and on the main wall, in a golden frame, the company's founding certificate with the founder's original signature. Catherine always told the story of how she'd convinced the mysterious founder to sell her the company before he vanished. Emma stopped in front of the certificate, her eyes lighting up with recognition. Michael felt his blood freeze when the girl exclaimed in her clear voice that it was her father's signature, identical to the one he put on her math notebooks when helping with homework. Catherine, entering the office at that moment to grab some documents, heard the child's claim and burst into contemptuous laughter. She couldn't believe the janitor's daughter had such a vivid imagination. With condescending tone, she explained that signature belonged to a tech genius, certainly not a man who cleaned bathrooms for a living. But Emma wasn't intimidated. With the innocent determination of children who know they're right, she pulled from her little backpack she always carried a worn photograph. It was an image of a younger man in suit and tie, signing documents in that very office. The man in the photo was unmistakably Michael, though with fewer wrinkles and more hope in his eyes. The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine stared at the photo with a mix of shock and fear she desperately tried to hide. Other employees, drawn by voices, had appeared at the office door. The tension in the air was palpable as static electricity before a storm. Michael closed his eyes, knowing the moment he'd feared and perhaps secretly desired for 5 years had finally arrived. His secret, guarded so long, was about to explode like a bomb in the heart of the company he himself had created. The silence in the CEO's office seemed to stretch into infinity. Catherine Sterling held the photo with hands that trembled imperceptibly, her brain working frantically to find an escape route. But Emma, with the devastating innocence of children, continued talking. She told how her father had shown her old notebooks full of formulas and diagrams, how he'd explained algorithms while helping with homework, how sometimes at night she heard him crying while looking at old photos. Every word was a nail in the coffin of the official company history. Michael finally spoke, his voice low but firm. He confirmed he was the man in the photo. He was TechVision Seattle's true founder. The story that emerged was as simple as it was devastating. 20 years earlier, Michael Bennett was a young software engineer with a revolutionary idea for artificial intelligence. He developed an algorithm that would become the foundation of all TechVision's success. But he was also naive, trusting too much in his business partner and girlfriend at the time, Catherine Sterling. Catherine, then a young lawyer specializing in intellectual property, had convinced Michael to temporarily put the company in her name for tax reasons. The documents he'd signed, thinking they were temporary, actually transferred all rights to her. When Michael discovered the deception and tried to sue, Catherine used her pregnancy as a weapon. Anna, Michael's wife, was pregnant with Emma and already sick. The treatments were expensive, and Catherine made a cruel proposal. Michael would give up all claims to the company in exchange for a steady job that would guarantee health insurance for Anna's care. Desperate, with a sick wife and a baby on the way, Michael accepted. The agreement stipulated that Michael would work at the company but in a humble role, never revealing his identity. Catherine gave him the janitor job, sadistically enjoying seeing the genius she'd robbed cleaning the floors of the empire built on his ideas. As Michael spoke, more and more employees crowded into the office. Some company veterans began remembering details that suddenly made sense. How the janitor always seemed to know when servers would have problems. How he occasionally left anonymous post-it notes with solutions to complex bugs. How he was always first to arrive and last to leave. James Chen, the company's CTO, suddenly paled, remembering a conversation from years before. He'd found Michael staring at code on a screen left on, and had jokingly asked if he understood anything. Michael had mumbled something about an error in line 347 and left. James had checked out of curiosity and found exactly the error he'd been searching for days. Catherine tried to deny everything, accusing Michael of being a mythomaniac, of manipulating his daughter with fantasies. But Emma pulled another document from her bag, her father's original notebook with sketches of the fundamental algorithm, dated and signed years before the company's official founding. The CEO tried to confiscate the notebook, but it was too late. Someone had already started recording with their phone. The story was spreading through the offices like wildfire. Within minutes, the entire company knew the janitor who emptied their trash was the true genius behind their success. Within an hour, TechVision Seattle was in chaos. The news had spread through the floors like a virus, mutating and growing with each telling. Employees crowded the hallways, whispering in disbelief, searching for Michael, who had taken refuge in his supply closet with Emma. Catherine Sterling had barricaded herself in her office, on the phone with the legal team, desperately trying to contain the disaster. But it was like trying to stop a tsunami with bare hands. Someone had already posted the story on LinkedIn, and journalists were starting to call. Meanwhile, in the small closet that served as Michael's office, a spontaneous procession of employees had formed. They came to apologize for years of indifference, to thank him for anonymous solutions he'd provided, to express shock and solidarity. Sarah Martinez, one of the senior programmers, openly wept, remembering how Michael had found her crying in the bathroom after a project failed, and had whispered a suggestion that saved her career. She'd never understood how a janitor could know code so well. David Thompson from R&D brought a stack of yellow post-it notes he'd kept for years. They were anonymous notes, with brilliant solutions to complex problems that appeared mysteriously on desks. The handwriting was identical to Michael's notebook. Emma watched everything with wide eyes, finally understanding why her father knew so much about computers, why he spent nights writing code on old computers, why he looked at the TechVision building with a melancholy that now made sense. The little girl hugged her father tightly, whispering she was proud of him, that it didn't matter if he cleaned floors, that for her, he'd always be the world's smartest dad. Michael cried, the tears he'd held back for years, finally free to flow. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. Investors were in uproar. The company's stock, public for 2 years, was already fluctuating dangerously. The story of a company built on theft and modern slavery of its true founder was a public relations disaster of nuclear proportions. Robert Anderson, board chairman and principal investor, arrived that afternoon. He was a man who'd built his empire on a reputation for integrity. When he saw the documents, when he spoke with Michael, when he understood the extent of the deception, his fury was terrifying in its coldness. He summoned Catherine to his temporary office. The conversation lasted exactly 15 minutes. When Catherine emerged, she was pale as a ghost, red eyes, trembling hands. She'd agreed to resign immediately and give up all claims to the company in exchange for avoiding legal action that would destroy her. But Michael, to everyone's surprise, didn't want revenge. When Anderson offered him the CEO role immediately, he politely declined. He explained he didn't want that kind of power, not anymore. The years as a janitor had taught him humility, the value of honest work, the importance of people over profits. He proposed something different instead, remaining at the company as Chief Innovation Officer, working directly with development teams, mentoring young talent, doing what he truly loved, creating, not commanding. And he wanted to do it while keeping part of his cleaning duties, to remind everyone, including himself, that no job is unworthy if done with dignity. The following weeks were a period of radical transformation for TechVision Seattle. Michael's story had captured the imagination of the American and international public. The genius janitor, as media called him, had become a symbol of resilience and dignity. The company immediately implemented structural changes. A foundation was created in Anna's name, Michael's late wife, to support families of innovators in economic difficulty.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like, and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
The first beneficiary was the medical fund Michael had never been able to fully afford for his wife. Emma became a constant presence in the offices after school. Employees had adopted her as unofficial mascot, and she spent afternoons learning coding from programmers, design from graphics team, strategy from the new CEO the board had appointed. A woman of great integrity, who insisted Michael be involved in every important decision. Michael's office was no longer the closet, but a bright space next to development labs. However, he insisted on keeping it simple. A desk, a computer, photos of Anna and Emma, and in the corner, his old cleaning cart he kept as a memento. Every morning, Michael still arrived at 6, but now divided his time between cleaning and creating. From 6 to 8 he cleaned, finding in that physical routine a meditation that freed his mind. From 8 on, he worked on projects he'd dreamed of for years. The first project he officially presented was revolutionary. An AI to diagnose leukemia early, dedicated to Anna's memory. He'd worked on the algorithm secretly for years, stealing sleep time, using old computers recovered from trash. Now, with company resources, the project came to life quickly. Employees who once ignored him now constantly sought his advice. But Michael treated everyone with the same kindness, from CEO to the latest intern. He'd learned respect doesn't depend on role, but on the person. One day, 3 months after the revelation, Catherine Sterling appeared at the company entrance. Security stopped her, but Michael, seeing her on cameras, came down personally. She'd aged years in months, arrogance replaced by something that seemed genuine remorse. They met at a nearby coffee shop. Catherine cried, asking forgiveness not just for the theft, but for systematic humiliation, for forcing him to choose between justice and his wife's health. She confessed that success built on deception had poisoned her, that she hadn't slept well one night in 20 years. Michael listened in silence, then said something that surprised her. He thanked her. Yes, she'd robbed and humiliated him, but she'd also inadvertently saved him from the arrogance that early success might have brought. The years as janitor had taught him lessons no MBA could give. He didn't completely forgive her. Some wounds were too deep, but wished her to find redemption. Catherine left knowing she'd never recover what she'd lost, but maybe, just maybe, she could still become a better person. A year after the revelation, TechVision Seattle had become a case study in business schools worldwide. Not just for the scandal, but for how the company reinvented itself, becoming a model of business ethics and social innovation. The AI project for leukemia diagnosis had received FDA approval and was being tested in 20 hospitals. It had already identified dozens of early-stage cases, saving lives. Michael insisted the technology be freely accessible to public hospitals. Emma, now 9, had started showing the same mathematical abilities as her father. But more importantly, she'd inherited his humility and kindness. When asked at school what her father did, she answered proudly, "He cleans offices and invents the future." The ceremony for the company's 20th anniversary was completely reimagined. Instead of celebrating Catherine's visionary leadership, as in previous years, they celebrated all the invisible workers who made innovation possible. Not just janitors, but technicians, assistants, all those who worked in shadow. During the ceremony, Michael was invited to speak. He appeared on stage in his janitor's uniform, clean and pressed. The audience, employees, investors, journalists, rose in a standing ovation lasting 5 minutes. His speech was brief but powerful. He spoke of how every person in the company was essential, from CEO to cleaning staff. He told how his best ideas came while cleaning, when the mind was free to wander. He emphasized that innovation comes not just from high-tech labs, but from observing, listening, being present. Then he called Emma to the stage. The girl, with the confidence of someone who knows she's loved, took the microphone and simply said her father had taught her it doesn't matter what job you do, but how you do it. That dignity isn't in the title, but in giving your best every day. She also announced a surprise she'd prepared with the IT team's help. She'd created a small program that visualized in real time all the anonymous contributions her father had given the company over the years. The screen filled with thousands of light points, each representing a solution, a suggestion, silent help. The visual impact was extraordinary, a constellation of hidden kindness and genius. The emotion in the room was palpable. Many cried openly, thinking of all the times they'd ignored the janitor, all the lost opportunities to know the extraordinary person hiding behind the uniform. Robert Anderson took the floor to announce the board had unanimously decided to establish the Michael Bennett Award for Silent Innovation, to be given annually to the employee who contributed to company success beyond their official role. But the biggest surprise came at the end. The new CEO announced the company would implement a revolutionary policy. Every employee, from management to interns, would have to dedicate 1 week per year to working in operational roles, cleaning, maintenance, reception, to maintain humility and connection with all aspects of the company. 5 years after that fateful morning when Emma recognized her father's signature, TechVision Seattle was unrecognizable. Not in appearance. It still occupied the same floors of the tower, but in soul. Michael, now 50, continued his double life serenely. Every morning he cleaned for 2 hours, then immersed himself in his projects. The AI for leukemia diagnosis had saved thousands of lives and been adopted throughout North America. He was now working on a system to democratize access to tech education in developing countries. Emma, 14, had become the youngest speaker at TEDx Seattle, talking about how her father taught her that innovation comes from humility. She attended high school but spent afternoons at the company, no longer as mascot, but as junior contributor to the development team. The most surprising story concerned Catherine Sterling. After years of therapy and reflection, she'd founded a nonprofit to protect young innovators' intellectual property rights. She worked pro bono to ensure no one suffered what she'd done to Michael. She never tried to contact him directly, but every year, on Anna's death anniversary, she donated anonymously to the foundation in her memory. Michael's office had become a pilgrimage site for innovators worldwide. They wanted to see the cleaning cart next to the high-tech workstation, the contrast that had become a symbol of how humility and genius could coexist. One spring afternoon, while Michael was cleaning the conference room after an important meeting, he found a young intern crying quietly. His name was Dmitry. He'd arrived from Ukraine with big dreams but felt inadequate, invisible, crushed by the competitive environment. Michael sat beside him and told him his story. Not the public version everyone knew, but the intimate one. Nights spent crying for Anna, moments when he'd thought of giving up, the shame of not being able to buy Emma the same things her classmates had. He told him being invisible could be a superpower. It allowed you to observe, learn, grow without the pressure of expectations. He suggested using that time to absorb everything, to prepare for when it would be his time to shine. Dmitry listened raptly, then asked how he wasn't bitter after all he'd suffered. Michael smiled and pointed to a photo on the wall. Emma at 5, dressed as an astronaut for Halloween, with a sign saying, "My dad cleans the stars." He explained his daughter had taught him there are no humble jobs, only humble ways of doing any job. That true innovation wasn't just technological, but human, finding dignity and purpose in whatever you do. 6 months later, Dmitry presented a revolutionary project to optimize business processes he'd developed by observing the company from his invisible position. The project was implemented and saved millions. At the year-end company award, he publicly thanked Michael for teaching him invisibility was a gift, not a curse. The last scene of this story takes place on a winter evening. Michael and Emma had stayed late at the office, he to finish a project, she for homework. While waiting for the elevator, Emma noticed the founding certificate had been changed. It now showed both signatures, Michael's and Catherine's, with a note saying, "Founded by Michael Bennett, innovation comes from humility." Emma hugged her father and told him she was proud, not because he was a genius, not because he'd created a multi-million-dollar company, but because he'd taught her that true greatness lies in remaining human, despite everything. As the elevator descended, Michael looked at his and his daughter's reflection in the metal doors. He saw a man in janitor's uniform and a girl with the future in her eyes. He saw pain transformed into wisdom, humiliation transformed into humility, loss transformed into legacy. The next day, Michael arrived as always at 6 in the morning. He took his cart, put on blue gloves, and started cleaning. While polishing the marble floor of the lobby, he smiled, thinking that every clean surface reflected not just light, but also the truth he'd learned. That true success isn't measured in what you own or the title you carry, but in how you transform your scars into stars that light the path for others. Emma was right when at 5 she'd said her father cleaned the stars. Only the stars were people, and he helped them shine, one at a time. With the same care he polished every surface, with the same dedication he wrote code, with the same love he'd loved Anna, and continued to love Emma. TechVision Seattle continued to grow and innovate, but its true innovation wasn't technological. It was having proven a company could have a soul, that success without integrity is disguised failure, and that sometimes the greatest hero is the one wearing work clothes and pushing a cleaning cart, harboring secrets that could change the world. but choosing instead to change the world one person at a time, with kindness, humility, and grace. And in every office in the world where a janitor pushes a cart, there's perhaps another Michael Bennett, another hidden genius, another story waiting for someone to have the humility to ask, "What's your name? What's your story?" Because we all have a story. And sometimes, the most powerful stories are kept by those we've learned not to see. Like if you believe everyone deserves respect regardless of their role, comment with your experience. Have you ever discovered someone you underestimated had hidden talents? Share to remind others that humility is true greatness. Subscribe for more stories revealing the extraordinary humanity of ordinary people. Because in the end, it's not our title that defines us, but how we treat those who can do nothing for us. And the most important signature we leave isn't on a $1 million contract, but in the hearts of people we've touched with our kindness.